The cold was a sharp claw, relentless and digging deep as I stepped off the creaking plain onto the compact snow of northern Canada. The wind howled like the damned souls of the forgotten, carrying whispers that didn't just chill the body, they froze the marrow. I came here chasing whispers of a nightmare made flesh, the Wendigo. The locals, huddled in their sparse village on the edge of an endless white forest, spoke of it only in hushed tones, as if saying its name too loud might invoke its wrath. According to legend, it was a spirit of insatiable hunger, turned into a gaunt beast roaming the woods, cursed by its greed and the cold. As I trudged towards the village, my gear weighed heavily on me. A .44 Magnum with silver bullets, each one engraved with ancient sigils, and a custom-made machete, its blade cold and eager. The village elder, a woman with eyes as hard as the frozen ground, met me at the edge. "They say it was once a man," she said, her voice barely rising above the wind. "But now it's less and more." "Less human, more monster," I replied, watching the forest line sway under the gusts of biting wind. She nodded, pressing an old, worn amulet into my hand. "This might protect you from its spirit, but nothing can protect you from its hunger." Her words were a cold comfort. I checked into what passed for a guest house, a small cabin with walls stuffed with newspaper for insulation. It reeked of wood smoke and old, forgotten stories. That night, under the eerie glow of a pale moon, I set out to track the beast. The snow was a blank canvas, marred only by the occasional flurry of wildlife tracks. But soon, I found what I was looking for. Not just tracks, but a trail of destruction. Trees scratched deeply, their bark torn away as if in a fury. Bones, both animal and disconcertingly human, littered the path, gnawed clean of any flesh. I followed the trail deeper into the woods, my breath a visible specter in front of me, each exhalation a ghost in the making. The wind seemed to carry screams now, a chorus of agony and despair, victims of the Wendigo's eternal famine. Suddenly, a figure darted between the trees. Fast, too fast for any normal creature, its limbs too long, its body horrifyingly thin. I caught a glimpse of its eyes, sickly yellow, like infected wounds. I raised my magnum and fired. The shot echoed, a roar in the silence of the forest. A hit, a scream, but not a kill. The chase was on. Snow sprayed under my boots as I sprinted, following the blood specks staining the white canvas beneath me. The creature was wounded, but it was far from dead. And in this bleak, forgotten part of the world, death was but a whisper in the dark. Always too close, always whispering your name. The forest seemed to close in on me as I followed the blood trail. Each step I took felt heavier, the cold more biting. The trees here were ancient, their branches intertwining overhead, casting twisted shadows on the snow. The Wendigo's blood was a dark, glistening path through the otherwise pristine white, a morbid beacon leading me deeper into the heart of this frozen wilderness. My breath clouded in front of me, the only warmth in this forsaken place. The wind howled through the trees, a mournful sound that seemed to carry the screams of the damned. I tightened my grip on the shotgun, the dragon's breath rounds loaded and ready. I'd seen what they could do, but I knew that against something like the Wendigo, even fire might not be enough. As I pushed further into the woods, the trees became more sparse, and the snow began to slope downwards into a narrow ravine. The Wendigo's trail led straight into the depths of it. I descended carefully, each step slow and deliberate. The walls of the ravine were steep, the snow here undisturbed, except for the deep gouges in the ice where something had scrambled or been dragged down. At the bottom, the trail took a sharp turn into a cave mouth, almost hidden beneath an overhang of rock and snow. The entrance was jagged, like a mouth waiting to swallow me whole. I paused at the edge, the darkness inside impenetrable, as though it absorbed the light rather than reflected it. I knew what was waiting for me in there. The stories about the Wendigo said it was cunning, a master of ambush. But I also knew it was hurt, desperate, and that made it dangerous in a different way. The cold seemed to grow even more intense as I stepped into the cave, my breath catching in my throat. The walls were slick with ice, the floor uneven underfoot. The deeper I went, the narrower the passage became until it opened into a cavern. I was greeted by the stench of death, a potent mix of decaying flesh and something fouler, something ancient. The light from my torch revealed the cavern's horrors. Carcasses of animals, twisted and broken, piled haphazardly along the walls. But what caught my attention were the human remains. Bones gnawed clean, tattered clothing frozen to the rock, their lifeless expressions still contorted in terror. Then, I saw it. The Wendigo crouched in the far corner, its back to me. It was larger than I'd anticipated, its limbs unnaturally long, the skin pulled taut over sharp bones. It was hunched over, gnawing on something. A severed limb. Human. The flesh, still fresh. I raised the shotgun, my finger hovering over the trigger, but something made me hesitate. The creature's head snapped up, its yellow eyes locking onto mine with a feral intensity. It dropped the limb and turned, slowly, almost deliberately, as if it was savoring the moment. With a guttural growl, it lunged, faster than anything that size should be able to move. I fired the first dragon's breath round, the cave lighting up with a burst of fire. The flames hit the Wendigo square in the chest, setting it ablaze. But it didn't stop. It barreled into me, the impact knocking the wind from my lungs as we crashed to the ground. The creature's claws raked across my chest, tearing through layers of clothing and flesh. I gritted my teeth against the pain and shoved the shotgun into its side, pulling the trigger again. Fire roared, and this time the Wendigo screamed, a sound that echoed off the cavern walls, shaking the very ground. I scrambled to my feet, using the moment to regain my position. The Wendigo was thrashing, trying to put out the flames consuming its body. But it wasn't retreating. It was mad with pain and hunger, and it would fight until either it or I was dead. I backed towards the cave entrance, trying to draw the creature out into the open where I'd have more room to maneuver. The Wendigo followed, still ablaze, a living torch of hate and hunger. I could see it was weakening, the fire taking its toll. But it wasn't enough. I reached into my pack and pulled out the last resort, a Molotov cocktail. Lighting the rag, I hurled it at the Wendigo just as it lunged again. The bottle shattered against its chest, the flames engulfing it entirely. The creature's screams filled the night as it collapsed in the snow, writhing in its death throes. I stood there, breathing heavily, watching as the Wendigo's movements slowed, then stopped altogether. The snow around it hissed and steamed, the smell of burnt flesh thick in the air. But I didn't let my guard down. I approached cautiously, shotgun aimed, and when I was close enough, I emptied the last of the dragon's breath rounds into its skull, ensuring it wouldn't rise again. As the fire slowly died out, I took a moment to catch my breath. The hunt had been brutal, and the night wasn't over yet. The wind still howled through the trees, the cold biting deeper. But the Wendigo was no more. I turned back toward the village, knowing that there was still much to be done before dawn. The cold was unforgiving as I made my way back through the forest, but the Wendigo was dead. And that was a victory I could savor, even if just for a moment. Still, there was something gnawing at me, an unease I couldn't shake. The stories said Wendigos didn't roam alone, and if there was one, there could be more. I wasn't about to let my guard down. The wind whipped around me, carrying with it the scent of ash and charred flesh. The trail back to the village was silent, too silent, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. My instincts screamed that this wasn't over. As I approached the outskirts of the village, the faint glow of firelight caught my eye. At first, I thought it was just the village fires keeping the cold at bay, but then I saw them. Shadows moving in the light, too fast and too many to be human. My blood ran cold. There were more of them, more Wendigos, and they were closing in on the village. I picked up the pace, sprinting through the snow as fast as my legs would carry me. My chest burned from the earlier fight, and every breath felt like ice in my lungs, but there was no time for pain. There was only time to fight. The village came into view, and with it, the full scale of the threat. 3 Wendigos, each as monstrous as the one I had just slain, were circling the perimeter, their gaunt forms silhouetted against the flames of the village's fires. The villagers were huddled inside their homes, barricading doors and windows, but they wouldn't hold for long. I had one last card to play, one final weapon that could turn the tide. Slung over my back, cold and heavy, was the flamethrower I'd been saving for a moment like this. The tank wasn't large, and I knew it wouldn't last long. But if I could just get close enough, it might be enough to drive the Wendigos back. I didn't waste time. I unslung the flamethrower, flicked the ignition switch, and advanced on the nearest Wendigo. The beast was too engrossed in its hunt to notice me until it was too late. I squeezed the trigger, and a torrent of fire erupted from the nozzle, engulfing the creature in flames. It screamed, a sound that echoed through the night as it flailed in the fire's grip. The other two Wendigos turned, their yellow eyes locking onto me with a fury that sent a shiver down my spine. But I didn't back down. I kept the stream of fire steady, forcing the first Wendigo back as it writhed in agony. I swung the flamethrower towards the second Wendigo, catching it just as it started its charge. The flames licked at its flesh, setting its fur and skin alight in an instant. The creature's momentum carried it forward, but the fire slowed it down, gave me time to maneuver. But the third Wendigo was already on me, too fast for me to react. It crashed into me, knocking the flamethrower from my hands and sending us both sprawling into the snow. The cold bit into my skin as I hit the ground, the weight of the Wendigo pressing down on me, its claws raking at my chest. I reached for my shotgun, but the creature's strength was overwhelming. It snapped at me with its jaws, trying to sink its teeth into my neck, but I twisted just in time, feeling the hot breath against my skin. I couldn't reach my weapons, but I still had my wits. I reached into my coat and pulled out the last Molotov cocktail, the one I'd hoped I wouldn't have to use. With one hand, I struck a match against the bottle, and with a desperate heave, I smashed it into the Wendigo's face. The creature howled as the flames engulfed it, rolling off me and thrashing in the snow. I scrambled to my feet, grabbing the flamethrower as I went, and turned it on the last two Wendigos, who were already burning, but not yet dead. The fire roared as I bathed the creatures in flames, the intense heat pushing them back towards the forest. They fought the fire with every ounce of strength they had, but the flames were relentless, devouring them until there was nothing left but ash and charred bone. The tank sputtered and died as the last of the fuel was spent. The Wendigos were gone, reduced to nothing but smoldering remains in the snow. I stood there, panting, the cold air harsh in my lungs, watching as the flames slowly died down. The villagers emerged from their homes, cautious and fearful, but their fear turned to relief when they saw the charred remains of the creatures that had terrorized them. The elder approached me, her eyes hard, but grateful. "You've done more than we could have asked," she said, her voice carrying the weight of the ordeal we'd all endured. I nodded, too tired to speak. The hunt was over, the Wendigos defeated, but the scars of the night would remain etched into the memory of the village and my own mind. As dawn broke over the snow-covered landscape, I knew it was time to move on. The cold still clung to me, but I welcomed it now, a reminder of the battle I had won. The Wendigo's curse had been lifted from this place, but I knew there would always be more monsters out there, waiting in the shadows, and I would be ready.